Hi, everybody. My name is Laurie Holmes, and I'm a love and relationship coach, author, and facilitator for the three principles understanding. I've been around this understanding for about 5 years, but I had a recent medical mystery or experience that I thought I would love to share with everyone. And the reason why it's such an interesting experience is that I went in for an endoscopy and a colonoscopy 3 weeks ago. And I was going to have a scope up both ends, if you understand what I'm saying. One down my throat, one up my ass. And they were looking for, polyps or problems, whatever. I'm 65 years old, so it was standard. This was my third endoscopy. And the endoscopy was mainly to check on something called Barrett's esophagus that I've had probably for the last 15 years, ever since I had an ulcer when I was in 2002, right after my mom died. And it's been acid reflux ever since, on medication for that, omeprazole, which I could never pronounce correctly, an acid reducer. And I was told I had this Barrett's esophagus and it had to be checked every 5 years. So along with that, I've had some neck issues. I had a ruptured disc and pinched nerve in 1988, and about, 10 years later, or 20 years later, they said that the neck was fused between cervical 4 and 5. So that, as far as I knew, that was all that was going on with my neck when I went into this procedure. Now, when I came out of the procedure, which is standard that it takes a little time for most people to wake up, I took a little bit longer than usual. And when my doctor came by, he said, "Oh, I see you're waking up," and explained to me that they did a biopsy in my esophagus because they did want to take a sample of where the Barrett's esophagus was. And he said it was very small and he didn't think it was going to mean anything, and, not to worry and all that. So I was fine. The anesthesiologist had come by and he had pretty much explained everything to me, and I was fine with that. But what I noticed when I woke up was I had this, and it's hard really to describe, but it was like a disconnection with my brain to my limbs. And I was conscious on a level that I don't even know how to explain, that they weren't working. And the reason I knew that was when the doctor said to me, "Okay, it's time for you to get up." I basically said no. And he said, "What do you mean no?" And I said, "I can't." And so there they went scrambling to try to figure out what do I mean by I can't. And they would pick up a limb and it was limp. And they picked up my legs and it flopped. My feet were in a downward position, which is what most people would understand as foot dropsy. It's when you're in a I can't think of the name of it right now, but just it's like the toes are down and they won't come back up. You can't rotate your ankles, you can't move your toes in any direction. They were just lying there. And so it took about 2.5 hours for them to figure out, well, there was nothing they could do for me at this surgery center I was at. And so they shipped me off by ambulance to the hospital, which began a series of tests and EKGs and CAT scans and MRIs to try to figure out what was wrong with me. But why was I not moving? And one of the first things they did, besides the EKG and the CAT scan, etc., was my first MRI. And I was told that this was going to be a very noisy, uncomfortable experience. And I'd heard that before, especially if you're lying flat on your back. Now, the first things that I noticed, just to explain a little bit further, I could not move my arms, my legs, my bladder, or my colon after I woke up from this procedure, but I could feel everything. So the first thing I noticed is that I could feel this pain in my head, kind of underneath the back of my head, radiating down and going over to the left shoulder and kind of in that area. And I could also feel pain in my right hip, radiating up to the lower part of my rib cage on the right side and down the outside of my right leg. Not like a nerve, because I've had nerve pain before. It was just hard to describe, very uncomfortable pain. And I wasn't feeling it anywhere else in my body that I was aware of. And so when they put me in this MRI machine, I was tied down. My limbs weren't moving. I had a form fitted over my face. I had a C neck. It's a thing that prevents your neck from being able to move at all. I forget what it's called, but it was like a collar they put around you. Very uncomfortable to wear. And so I was rolled into this machine, and it's like being rolled into a coffin, where you don't have much room on either side before you would hit the walls of this machine, and it comes down pretty close to your face. Not very much distance between, if I open my eyes, the top of this thing on the top of me and the form that was over my face. So they didn't give me a mask to wear, but they did put earplugs in my ears to prevent my eardrums from being damaged, but not to prevent me from listening to the sound. So I was already extremely uncomfortable in my back. My neck was hurting, my back was hurting, and lying flat was not a position that felt really comfortable. And also they said the noise was going to be really loud, like jackhammers going off and drills going off and just other metallic sounds that would be hard to describe unless you've heard it, but you would roll back and forth depending on what part of the body it was scanning, and it was scanning every cell in your body. So it took a while, and they said usually they do 1, and they'd ordered 3 for me. So that was a long time to be lying on my back with this noise and in pain and not being able to move. So just picture that, if you will. And then when I was rolled in, and they always say, "Are you okay?" I was warm. They had blankets on me and all that for my comfort, while I was extremely uncomfortable. So that was the part that was kind of hilarious in a sense. And as I'm lying there and the sounds begin, I noted right off the bat, yep, the sounds are really noisy, and yep, it sounds like a jackhammer going off over my head. And there were moments when I felt extreme pain, and moments when I really didn't like the sound at all, but I had nowhere to go. And anyone who's ever experienced this would probably say something similar, that you're kind of along for the ride whether you like it or not. You're not in control at all of the circumstances, for sure. Your body's not in control because it can't do anything. Your mind is just there with whatever's going on. So you're kind of, you're in and out of what I call a thinking state and a being present state. And it was at one point while I was floating between the two that I had and it wasn't a realization where it was obvious to me, oh, let's have a realization, oh, let's have an insight. It was more like there was a part of me that just let go of everything. And since at this point, it was so early in what had happened to me that I didn't know if movement would return. I didn't know when movement would return or if movement would return ever again. So I was in this state of not knowing. I was in this state of experiencing pain, and I was in this state of not being in control of anything. And it was like all of a sudden, the sound turned into music. And I was bouncing in my mind, because my body couldn't move. I was bouncing in with the music as the sound was going off over my head and around me. It was as if I heard within these sounds music. And I floated out of my experience, or I should say floated into the reality of the moment and out of the the head experience of trying to figure it out. And I was in this joyous, beautiful place inside myself. And what I saw in that moment was that I was okay. And it was beyond a intellectual understanding of being okay. Because we all say the words, somebody says, how are you doing? You say, oh, I'm okay. And you're okay, but the way that you're expressing that isn't really coming from a experience of being okay. It's just words you're saying. Well, in that moment, I had come into this place where I truly was okay. I knew that nothing from this point on was going to hurt me or do anything to me that I wasn't already experiencing in that moment. And so if I was okay inside myself, totally restricted from being able to do anything other than barely move my head back and forth and shrug my shoulders up a little bit. That was it. And I could move a little bit of my torso. Everything else was restricted. If I could allow that to be okay, in a sense of okay, more on a spiritual level of okay than on a physical level of okay, and even that was okay too, that I was okay even in that space. But what I saw was I would be okay if I died. I would be okay if I was a quadriplegic for the rest of my life, because my soul was okay. And I knew that since I knew that, and I knew that on a level that was not figure-outable or understandable or even explainable, I was joyous. And I had risen above the pain that my body was in. And for a few moments there, the time just seems to disappear when you are fully engaged in life and in the moment. You know, you're not your body not moving, you're not your pain, you're not the noise that you're experiencing, and although you are experiencing the noise, you are just one with everything that you are connected to. And that's an indescribable experience, because what it tells you is that anything outside of that is basically an illusion. You know, you're living fully 100% in the moment, which is the only thing that actually exists. And in that moment, you are an expression of love and wholeness and wellness and okayness. And I had reached that place inside myself where no matter what the outcome was, I knew I was okay. Now, that's a pretty incredible place to come to when you are according to doctors and anybody looking at you, would look not okay, would look like, you know, something's wrong with this woman and we've got to figure it out. We've got to figure out why she can't move and what happened to her. But it didn't matter. And I know that might sound silly to say, but it truly didn't matter, because I knew that I, this being of love and light and wholeness and wellness, was okay. And they figure it out or not figure it out, it wasn't going to change anything. I was not in charge. I was definitely not in control. And I was living in the moment because I had no idea what was going to happen next. And when I cycled out of it, I cycled back into the pain. And about an hour and 7 minutes in, I said, okay, I have a choice here. I can keep going, or I can just say stop, because I was at a point of pain where, you know, I couldn't keep cycling in and out. I did and I didn't. But at that point, I cycled out and I said, okay, I've had enough. And I said, get me out of here. You know, I'm hot. I'm in pain. I want to get out of here. And they rolled me out and they said, well, we've got 7 more minutes. And I said, no, I'm done. And I was okay with that. It's like, no, I'm done. and they rolled me back to my room. Now I went from this euphoric state of being totally present, being totally one with everything, and then they rolled me off the table and rolled me onto another table, and all that rolling was excruciating. And I remember there was just this place where didn't even realize I'd been holding it together. I didn't even realize that, there was a part of me that just had to completely let go. And I just started to cry. And I cried. The deepest I've cried, I can't even remember. Oh, I do remember. Yeah, when my lover shot himself to death. I cried like that. I cried from the depths of my soul. I don't even know how to describe what I was crying for or about. It was just releasing that out there. And I couldn't hold anybody. I couldn't touch anybody. But I had two nurses on both sides of me, and they had just brought their heads in real close, and they were just there with me in a moment that was hard to describe, but it was beautiful. It was like an exquisite, beautiful agony that I was experiencing. I had this pain, and I had this sadness, and yet there was this joy of knowing that I wasn't alone, that I was, there was that okay, you're okay, mixed in with it, but it was also okay to let go. It was also okay to cry. It was also okay to allow that emotion to come through, and not to feel bad about it, not to feel sad about the fact that I was sad, just letting that emotion out. And then I was okay, and I was done. It was finished. And I basically said, please give me something for this pain. And I think I ended up on morphine. But the irony or the funny part of that was that it was like the next time I went to another hospital, like 24 hours later, and I had another MRI, and it was like for a half an hour, and I was excruciating pain after I got out of the ambulance on that ride, because that was a 2+ hour ambulance ride over very bumpy South Carolina road. So anybody that knows the Charleston area, the route that I took to the hospital there, they would kind of get an idea of why I was feeling some pain. At that time, they gave me a whole collection of pills, and inside that was OxyContin. Now, I'm not saying this is not a plug for OxyContin on any level, shape, or form. But what the irony was on that one, when they gave it to me, and I went into the MRI for the second time, it was like a totally different experience. I was still immobile. I still couldn't move anything. I was still in pain. None of that had changed. But the OxyContin just knocked me out. It was like I said to them, I was lying in the bed waiting for them to move me to the gurney. I think I had already moved to the table where they were going to take me into the MRI machine and I said, I'm going out. And I remember it was like less than 15 minutes. I don't even, time again, who knows how long it took. But I was in a state of, I'm not really here right now. I am somewhere else. And it wasn't the present moment. It was just kind of a floating in, wherever that place was. So I literally went through the machine in half an hour, have no memory of it. I mean, I heard the noise, but it was on a level that was like, didn't even bother me. It was like, okay, so I'm in the machine, big deal. I came out and they rolled me to the room, and I remember the ladies are going, Laurie, or I guess they go by Ann, because I'm known by my given name. They said, Ann, you got to wake up now. And I'm like, what? And they're like, we're worried about you. We want you to wake up. And I went, really? It's like my response to it was even making them more concerned. And I was fine. And they were worried. And I said, well, I don't want to get, the girl that gave me the pills, I don't want to get her in trouble. I like her. And they said, that's why we want you to wake up. And so I don't remember much after that. That was one of those, the best I felt while I was there, but unfortunately, I never got that again kind of situations, you know? But the point of my having this conversation with all of you is that what I saw is that in any moment, we are either in the present moment, in reality, with whatever's going on in our life, or we're in La La Land up here, making up what we think is going on. And I was able, in a very profound way, to observe that happening to me when I didn't have a body that I could count on for anything. I couldn't scratch an itch that was bothering my head. My hair had come down and was tickling me. And I said, and this is what I'm thinking inside my head, I'm going, oh, well, that's interesting. I can't do anything about that. And so it just disappeared. It went away. And then, if the doctor came by and they were doing all these tests on me, muscle tests and nerve tests and whatever, because they were surprised I could feel everything. So they had to keep testing it. Whatever hospital I was in, I just got more of those tests. And the doctor would come by and says, I want to apologize for what I'm about to do. And then he'd pinch me really hard. Well, I couldn't respond. I couldn't react. I could feel it in my head going, wow, that hurt. But I could not, my body didn't react to it. And they did that all over my body. And it got down to my foot, and, they put the thing up my foot so to see if I'd have that kind of reaction you get if somebody takes a tool and runs it up the bottom of your foot. My foot didn't react. And I'm thinking if my foot could react, it would have kicked you right in the face because it didn't feel good. But I didn't. So I kept my sense of humor through the whole thing because I knew there wasn't anything I could do about it. Liking or disliking it didn't change the facts of what was going on. My favorite one, though, my absolute favorite one, was when they had my elbow, when my elbow would finally stay up instead of flopping down. And my left arm was coming back quicker than the right. But it was like you turned on a switch on and off. And 1 minute something might move, but it was random. There was nothing that I could tell connections were happening. And so my elbow was up in the air like this, and my arm was like this. And the doctor took my arm, and it might have been physical therapy, I don't remember who it was, and they pushed it toward my face. Now I'm sitting there slapping myself in the head with my own hand. And he goes, well, that's interesting. Most people would stop themselves from slapping themselves in the face. And I looked at him and I said, what part of I can't move my body did you not understand? It's like it was comical to me that everything they tried, wasn't very successful in the very beginning anyway. I was this way for 53 hours. So toward the end of that, as my body was starting to come back online slowly but surely, like my arm could stay up, but the rest of me was still unresponsive. He thought, well, surely I would stop myself from slapping me in the face. And I thought if I could do that, I'd slap you for trying it, So it was an extraordinary experience. I don't wish it on anyone. But for me, what it really opened up for me is that who I am is love. And who I am is okay. And who I am is truly a spiritual being having a human experience. And this is the vessel that I am operating, so to speak. I kind of like to think of it as like an avatar. And what's running the show is this good old brain up here. It allows us to think and to feel and to experience life and to slap ourselves in the face if we can move our body. And if we can't, then there's a disconnection between the two. And I've worked with people that were called incomplete quadriplegics, which I was called. Or I've worked with people that were true quadriplegics and true paraplegics. And what they had was a zest for life. They had a zest for living right now. this moment. This is all we have. Don't squander it. Don't use it lightly. Don't forget that we are not guaranteed the next moment, a tomorrow, or a future. That we can live each moment right now is our future. And I'm writing a book coming up soon called The Myth About Falling in Love and Why Relationships Fail. Because I'm really clear now more than ever before that you are an example, you are an expression of love. And you bring that expression of love and that ability to communicate and connect with another human being, and then they offer that same to you, and then you have a communication and you have a relationship. But when we expect things from others, we're often disappointed. And what I saw was my expectations in the moment of not being able to do anything with my body just went right out the window. I said, wow, expectations don't work here. This is not something that I have no idea. I'm living moment to moment in the unknown, no idea what's going to happen. So I became playful, I became curious, I became interested in seeing what was going to happen next. So imagine your relationships like that. Imagine that you have that possibility of living life playful, joyous, curious, neutral, not attached. What more fun could you have in life if you came from that place? Thank you all for listening. I appreciate it and hope you'll continue to follow me and see what else I'm going to come up with next. Thanks. Bye.